want them. Now discover them for the first time.
2 aphid beers.
Call me crazy, but I have a thing about drinking from the caboose of another creature.
DreamWorks Feature Animation and Pacific Data Images put their imaginations into overdrive to bring the unique world of Antz to life.
I was not to be a worker.
We tried to imagine the world from the ants' perspective. We always said it's not about how small the ants are, it's about how big their world is.
We did spend a lot of time with cameras down at ant level, looking up at the world, looking out at the world.
The guy's got us screwed loose.
Some of the biggest stars in Hollywood jumped at the chance to voice some very small parts.
Let's take a walk on the wild side. It's the ultimate character acting. And all of these things are just metaphors for the things that we struggle with, where we feel like we're stuck in the gum on the bottom of someone's shoe.
Oh, brother. Suddenly I've lost my appetite.
This is great fun. This is kind of what you thought acting was going to be like.
Sacrifice.
It's amazing. I wish other films I had done had this kind of production value. It's incredible. It's cast of zillions.
See? The little guy made it!
Okay. All you ants, get over there. And all you ants, get over there.
Ouch.
What on earth are you doing?
There's nothing that will get an actor quicker than a good script, because they're not easy to find. Would you prefer to be carting around dirt all day?
Oh, Mother, don't be so dramatic.
The story of Antz centers around Z, a common worker who longs to be his own ant.
It's this whole gung-ho superorganism thing that I can't get.
Our ant is played by Woody Allen. When you combine his neuroses with the concept, the sky's the limit.
My father was basically a drone, like I've said, and the guy flew away when I was just a larva.
He falls in love with an ant princess, and his quest to get her love actually throws him into a series of adventures.
You have to help me. If I can't see her again, my life is just not worth living.
Oh, boy.
Z has got a best friend named Weaver. And in Weaver, we see what it's like to be one of these big galoots whose job is to go to war at a moment's notice.
What happened to Z?
He's taking a personal day, so I'm filling in.
You fill in anymore and you'll explode.
General Mandible, he's got a grand and horrifying scheme for what he envisions as the perfect colony.
Let's go marching one by one, hurrah, hurrah.
I am proud to send you into battle.
Slaughter termites just for fun, hurrah, hurrah.
To bring the computer-animated characters to life, PBI developed proprietary software that took CGI technology to new heights.
And there have been some wonderful developments on Antz, in particular the facial animation system.
We actually have muscles that control all the face. Like if I do a little sneer, I'm contracting the muscle here.
The number of actual controls, both bones and muscles, was over 300. I think it just ups facial animation one more level and just provides a richness and a believability beyond anything I've seen so far.
Obviously, when you have a colony of ants, you expect to see hundreds, thousands, millions of ants. We've basically taken 4 or 5 different techniques and been able to develop a system and an architecture for crowd systems that is probably the most sophisticated.
You're used to those kind of things happening in live action, but it gives a layer of reality to our film that is just terrific.
Hey, buddy, get back in place.
What if I don't like my place?
Buckle up, Spanky.
On October 2nd, be prepared to go underground with a romantic comedy adventure of great magnitude. Antz.
It's beautiful.
We'll take a look at character design for Antz. Of course, the first question we asked ourselves is, what do ants look like in our movie? Pretty quickly we said we do want them to be 6-limbed, but this first drawing you can see actually has 4 arms instead of 4 legs, which is what we eventually settled on. The next drawing shows another version of the 4-armed character, but do they wear clothes? And here we're exploring whether the ants actually wear anything.
Another illustration by the same artist with even more elaborate clothing, and again a very, very angular sort of stark presentation on a character.
We looked at countless electron microscope pictures of real insects and tried to, incorporate some of that, but you quickly learn that real insects are terrifying. This next image, this lineup of workers and soldiers, Z and Bala, this really shows how strongly we let ourselves be influenced at one point by the real world of insects, and how quickly we realized that if you wanted to be passionate about these characters, we couldn't stick to the real world. It was just too horrifying. Down under in that size.
Very fascinating designs, perhaps hard to connect with ultimately.
Next drawing shows perhaps the other extreme.
Yeah, this is almost like Jiminy Cricket in a way. It had very soft, rounded shapes, a much simpler design.
Not six-limbed, but very human. And of course, obviously, we thought maybe that was too extreme in another direction. So we pulled a little bit away from that as well.
Next one, a very ant-like approach.
And then the following one shows with these guys wearing gloves and with these very funny ideas with the antenna and light bulbs. I mean, we really started playing with appeal, and frankly, this was some of the first things that for Z and the look of the generic ants we started to get pretty excited about.
It really is all about that ability to look at these characters' faces and understand if there's something interesting, perhaps complex, going on in their head.
I want to see them thinking. Of course, we weren't afraid of going a little crazy. Here he is, Z, in all of his glory. Just imagine what our film could have been. It came down to really kind of a battle of shape, and so a lot of the next Z designs we're going to look at are just extremes of shape, from triangular faces and big bottomed characters to creatures that are heart-shaped in head and limb. But this little guy with a striped gaster, of course, ants don't have bottoms, they have gasters. There's our entomology lesson for the day. This little guy is starting to, I think you see how related he is to where we ended up in the film. Four Hands was so busy and necessitated so much animation that we thought it would actually get in the way of the acting.
Well, we found that by having the character have four legs but walk so that the legs on one side of the body moved together, it really kept us away from that four-legged animal, horse-like walk.
This lovely little beseeching-looking character tugging on his fingers here. We're starting to see what makes great character design successful. It's half about the design, but the other half is just appeal. Does the character look like they're thinking? Does it look like somebody who's got a story to tell? I don't know who did we think this guy was going to be.
We really asked our character designers, and especially Raman Hoy, who kind of headed up that effort, to do hundreds, if not thousands, of drawings exploring what ants could look like, and we got some really wonderful designs. This is one of my favorite designs that we all knew we'd never use in the film, but
the gecko-headed guy. I don't know.
I've got it up on my wall, in fact.
And there we have him. There is Z. It looks like he just had a really bad marine haircut, and he's been sleepless for 4 days. Could have been a very different movie. We certainly took a look at all these different directions.
Another simple Z.
Simple Z, 2 arms, 2 legs. Now we're starting to see some of the directions we settled on. How complicated to make the bodies, how complicated to make the faces, how insect-like to make the details. And this lovely close-up of this rather sleepy-looking gentleman was the first time we started to get excited about finding Z. And we played with lots of subtle variations on that face, turned it into one of the first characters created on the computer, who then became one of our generic characters when we moved on to the final Z design, which we see here. Trying to find some age and maturity, some lines in the face.
We did find that when we took this particular head into the sculpture that we had to reduce a lot of the lines because, of course, once they're actually there in 3 dimensions, they show up all the more. But this was definitely the final drawing, which allowed us to head into sculpture.
And then we start exploring it. What happens under extreme conditions like this gale force wind? Or as he goes through moments of the film of solitude and loneliness or confusion. And so we actually churned out, particularly the amazing Raman Hoy, churned out, I think, quite literally hundreds, if not thousands of drawings. Even after we had done all the work of settling on a design, it was time to explore that design to its fullest. Bala had the same kind of challenges coming up with
things we said to ourselves very early in this film is that this was not going to be a film about little tiny creatures. This was going to be a film about a huge world.
Antz is a film about one ant in a colony of millions.
We've brought together directors Eric Darnell and Tim Johnson to explain the detailed process of the making of Antz.
We're going to take a look at how do we make an animated film, and where does it start, and how does it go about finding its way to final animation. Here, in fact, is where it starts, as storyboard drawings. Sometimes primitive, very simple, sometimes very elaborate, but always about content. It's essentially like a comic book filmed in the timing and order of the actual sequence.
Yeah, Randy Cartwright was our head of story, and he worked with anywhere from 2 other to 15 other story artists, depending upon where we are in the production, to lay these storyboards out for the film.
Ouch! We actually have Woody Allen and Sharon Stone's voice here, but when a storyboard begins its life, it's often recorded with temporary talent, including Eric and myself and the producers and other artists and animators who lend a hand by lending their voice, and we use that as the very starting point to start cutting together images of the film.
And as you'll see as we go through the process here, a great deal of the look of the final images are derived from the layout and the design and composition and the storyboards. And the more of that we can come up with at this phase, of course, the more effective we can be down the line when production costs really crank up.
You can even see a lot of the acting is starting to happen in the drawings on screen.
Yeah, it almost has to, in fact, so we're sure we're heading in the right direction.
Now, this rather frightening-looking series of images is layout. Simon Smith, our head of layout, will work with the directors, Eric and myself, work with storyboard artists, and start to realize these drawings in the three-dimensional world of the computer. And this is the equivalent on the computer of what a stick figure is in a drawing. Primitive, but it explains the basics of what we're doing.
So it's critical that we of course get the space laid out. It is a sort of a virtual three-dimensional space, and we have to make sure that our camera is in the right place, our characters are going to be framed correctly once they go into final animation, and we have to give those animators doing the final animation the camera angle that their character is going to finally be seen from, because they need to animate to the camera. They have to play to the camera's point of view.
You can see, by the way, that we didn't have the dance cycle done yet.
That's right.
So what did we have? The drinking cycle. It's an aphid fest going on here.
But it worked in the sense that we saw sort of the density of the crowd.
It gave us our cinematography, our first look at composition. Animation really only works with camera. Even though the layout artists work to give us a sense of some of the action, the animators will strip that away and start from scratch. Here we go into the first look at unlit animation for the film.
This is like a quick rendered version, or the images are calculated very quickly on the computer with all the detail and deformation and animation in the model, but without all of the lighting that adds a whole another level of complexity to the generation of the images.
You can see the dancers in back of Zienbala are at low resolution, simply because we don't need the information and we don't ask the computer to deal with the extra information at this point.
Rex Grignon and Raman Hoy were the supervising animators on Antz, and just did an incredible job managing, if you will, these characters and making sure that we sort of maintained integrity in the way that Z performs. We have 24 animators working on the film, and all of those animators will animate all the different characters in the movie.
And that was only at the end. I think we started with 15, 16 and grew to that level of 24 by the end of the production.
So part of what Rex and Raman did, besides, of course, doing animation and sort of setting the standard for the animation in the film, was to make sure that we maintained this level of continuity with the characters as we passed a shot from one animator to another, or gave different animators shots with the same character in it.
We worked with the choreographer, by the way, on the dance, and then story artists as well as animators refined that choreography. But it sure comes alive with lighting, and I think this transition shows that. Lighting in the computer doesn't mean simply shining a light on a surface. It also means how the surface reacts to light. Does it look like stone or dirt or skin? All of these things called textures are painted, and then they're wrapped kind of like rubber wallpaper around the surfaces of the characters to create the complex patterns of light and shadow that appear on the characters. Great lighting supervisors. A team of about 30 people were headed up by Janet Rentel, Gene Cunningham, Paul Wang, and Craig Ring. The four of them working with this talented group of people of every background, from very technical to very artistic. Painters and programmers all help cooperate to produce the beautifully lit images of the film.
And again, it's often the little things that are done in lighting, as with every other specialty, that really make these images sing. You know, the highlights in the eyes of the characters, the way that the sheen on their bodies is just so.
We did a little special effects work in this as well, with making the lighting look a little like through cheesecloth, through a little Vaseline on the lens, a little glowiness to things. All of those special effects add to the filmic lighting to create a little magic moment for Z and Bala.
This is great, just to see all four versions play at once, and you can see, looking at the upper left and lower right, how similar many things are, and also see where decisions were made in the process to change things based on discoveries we made in layout or even motion.
The process is a lot of people and a lot of time. We may go through storyboarding a sequence many times, and it may be 6 months of storyboarding, going through several different story artists trying things out before it goes through layout. Layout has a couple weeks where 4 people or so work on it to perfect it. And then we go to motion. A sequence like this can take a team of our animators, perhaps about 8 of them working on this sequence. They might work on the sequence for another 8 weeks or so before it's handed to lighting. And they again may work with a team of about 8 people or so, taking another 8 weeks to complete it. Any given scene of the 36 scenes in our movie may actually take upwards of almost a year to actually go through the entire pathway of production.
So you can imagine how many shots are actually in production at one time. It's quite a job to manage all of that and make sure that everybody gets the feedback they need to keep moving forward.
It's true, we sing the praises of all of our artists, but the production management, actually guiding this stuff through production, is terrific. Aaron Warder, Brad Lewis, Patty Witten were the heads of that whole production management as the producers of the film, and they really created a team that could efficiently generate all of this creative output.
So this is the section of the sequence, of course, where the drop of water comes down and Trap Z.
Another look at how the story is really told so effectively with some very simple drawings before you get all of the elaborateness of computer animation, and before you get 100 people involved. You can really make an impact as a story artist on the film.
And you certainly learn a lot by seeing the whole film this way before you take it into production.
You in particular, a sequence like this one, which is so difficult to do water and computers, our effects department, Ken Bielenberg and Philippe Gluckman in particular, as heads of the department, they look at the storyboard and they start to see the problems facing them as effects animators, and they begin to work with programmers and design all of the different technical ways in which they're going to pull off the sequence.
At this stage, the modeling department starts supplying final models for things too, so that we can lock down camera angles and what have you. So Conrad Dutton leads a team that is working furiously to make sure that we have the high-resolution models that we need to tell the story.
You can see a lot of the very early work of the effects department, and I think I mentioned actually in the commentary during the film how we altered the height of that water drop. You can see the pre-altered height and how really very short distance they fall.
Here's the water drops that have been added.
The effects department's work.
Effects worked on this.
The geodesic dome.
Yes.
It looks like he's trying to escape from Epcot Center, which, if you've been there, maybe you've experienced too.
He's trapped in Buckminster Fullerene.
Great interaction between Bala and the stuff the effects guys did with that sphere. And there we have again the long drop this time. Compare that to what we saw in the layout, and you'll see how dramatically stronger that feeling is when we increase the height.
I think we ended up losing a lot of the water drops on the characters when we took them into lighting because it was just distracting.
Yeah.
So you get to this very final stage and often are making a number of adjustments.
Lighting, yeah, just extraordinary to get the water, all the refractions, and all of the strange effects that water has on light. Ouch! Here's a little bit of water on the ground, but we really just felt it was too distracting to make a big deal out of it.